All right, it's 6 o'clock, and being respectful of everybody's time, we will keep this moving forward. I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to join us for tonight's Paulding County Zoning Inspector meeting. This is a quarterly meeting that we started about 3 quarters ago because we've had very good quarterly mayor's meetings. We've had great every half-year trustee meetings, and out of those discussions, there always seem to be questions about zoning. So we started this zoning group, and we do invite mayors, and we do invite council people, and we do invite trustees, because the more communication we have county-wide, the better off I feel that everybody's moving everything in the right and same direction. So before we get too deep, let's all stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll use the flag here on the wall. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Generally, for this meeting, we've been meeting often with Sarah McCabe, who has been heading up this meeting and discussion, and we've learned a lot about the GIS system. We've learned a lot about reporting for the townships. It's just been very good information, and I encourage all of you to share with your zoning inspectors or others that aren't here this evening of the good things that this group is trying to accomplish and move forward. So, we've got zoning inspectors that are as new as, Kenny, how long have you been a zoning inspector?
About 2 months.
Okay, all the way up to, people that have been here for years and years. And what we found was, the neat thing I felt, was that the new guys were asking questions of the more senior inspectors, and at the same time, senior inspectors were learning about things that were changing that they weren't even aware of. So that's the kind of communication and things that are coming out of these meetings. It's been good for mentoring, been good for learning, and I think we're on a good positive direction. One of the downsides to being a zoning inspector, like Kenny, here he is, he's got 2 strikes against him because one, he's got an economic development director that won't quit thinking outside the box and trying how to figure out things to do that we don't normally deal with. And 2 is, I'm not an elected official, so they can't get rid of me. So, that's where you're strike 1, strike 2 before you even step into the position. But we all have a common goal of seeing the county move forward, and we want to continue to work and see how that can happen. And as this is all taking place, Judge Rister thankfully stepped up and said, hey, I wouldn't mind presenting to this group for a minute. And so we're very thankful for her to take the time out of her schedule and join us this evening. Look, we all in our townships and villages have the bad apples, right? We all have them. There's nobody that's going to make a difference in that tonight. We're not here to critique the bad apples. We're not here to try and figure out individual problems. We're here to collectively hear and understand how we might move forward together. So that's what we're here for this evening. We're going to let Judge take the podium and talk a little bit about what she would like to share with us, and we'll go from there. Judge, with that, I'll let you have that.
So, Tim says he wants to get things moving, get things going fast, but then he puts me up here, and I'm a lawyer and a judge, and I can talk and talk and talk. So, I brought some things with me tonight because I had the ladies run a few reports for me today, so we can kind of look at some statistics about zoning things in Paulding. I think that might be helpful too. Zoning ordinances, junk ordinances, nuisance ordinances, those kinds of things, and the dog warden cases to me are alike. They're a lot alike because you get the dog warden cases coming in and somebody gets a ticket because their dog is running loose. And they're very emotional about their animals, their dogs, and they come in and they say, my dog wasn't running loose. It was the neighbor's dog over here, or it was the neighbor's dog over here. And the zoning cases are kind of like that. These people come in and then they say, well, that guy over there, his grass is longer than mine, and this guy over here, he didn't clean up the tires that are stacked on his property either. So they're kind of a lot alike in that emotions tend to run high. It's, it's our property, and we don't want people saying that we're not keeping our property the way that it should look. And we don't want people saying we're not taking care of our dogs. So the emotions run high when these folks come in. So I try to kind of say to them right away, well, we're not talking about the neighbor's dog. We're not talking about the neighbor's grass. We're talking about what, there was something here where they're saying that either your grass is too tall or you have junk tires in your yard or whatever else it might be. And I try to at least get them focused on, we're just looking at your property right now and the ordinance that they think you're not following. Let's take a look at that. So emotions do tend to run high with these things. I had the ladies, I said, I went in today and I said, can you pull me a report on this and a report on that so I can kind of get some idea. In looking at I just went back to 2020. And in 2020, we had 8 zoning cases in the entire county that were filed with the municipal court. 21, we only had 2 cases filed. 2022, there were 19 zoning ordinance or violation cases filed. And then 23, we had 8. And 24, we haven't had any. 22, that anomaly in there, where's the mayor? So that most of those were Paulding. But Paulding had filed, I think, probably 11 or maybe 14 of those or something. They had several that they filed just that year, Paulding did. But it's a mix. I mean, some of these are Antwerp, some of them are Oakwood, they're townships. There's just a real mix of all in these numbers. Everybody's filing some kind of a zoning violation case against, some of the property owners. So it's quite a big mix. What I did discover in the majority of these cases, even in 22 when we had 19 cases that were filed, the majority of them, by the time, I know you guys all send, the zoning inspectors are sending letters out, hey, check this, or, your grass is too tall, and these things, and most of them are resolved with the letters that the zoning inspectors are sending out. They're maybe not happy about it, they might grumble a little bit, but they fix whatever it is that the letter says. And if they don't fix it, and then it gets taken to the prosecutor's office and they bring it in, or your village solicitor, and they bring it in and file it, then it gets filed and it's a court case. So these are the only ones, these are not letters sent out to everybody about your grass or any of those other things. These are just, the actual cases that were brought to the prosecutor or to your village solicitor who were brought them into the court. So it's quite a mix. I mean, everybody in the county files quite a few of these. Very few of them end with not having, either they don't pay their court fines or court costs. Most of them come in, they admit guilt, they pay their fines and court costs. If they don't pay their fines and court costs, the way that the court collects that money, we put a registration block on their vehicle, so they can't register. They get ready to go to, the BMV the next time to get their tags, and they're told, we can't give you your tags for your vehicle because you owe money to Paulding County Court, it looks like. So then they have to come in and pay, and that's how we collect if they don't pay it otherwise. So of those cases that we had, there were only 2 of them that rose to the level, or 3 of them, that rose to the level where they were a jailable offense because they had been repeat, under the same code, had been other cases in the past that had been filed. So only 3 of them had risen to where they could be put in jail for the offense. Otherwise, these are just minor misdemeanors or unclassified misdemeanors. They can't go to jail for the offense unless it would happen repeatedly under the same statute. So there's the Ohio Basic Code. Some of the townships have your own zoning ordinances. The villages have their own zoning ordinances. Everybody has their own, under which code or which section you're going to file under. And they're all similar, but not quite the same. One of the things that we looked at was when it gets to the level where it is a jailable offense, that person, if they're indigent and they don't have the money to hire an attorney, I have to appoint them an attorney. So we looked at how much did we spend on court-appointed counsel fees. And in that time period, 2020 to 20, well, I included 24, we spent about $3,400 taxpayer money for the attorneys to represent the people who are violating the ordinances. So not everybody gets an attorney to represent them, or most of these folks, they can't afford one. So if they are in that category where they would have possibility of jail time, they get a court-appointed attorney. So one of the things that I found with, when we bring these folks in, they come in, maybe they just admit they clean up their property and we don't have any further problems. But a lot of times they come in and they're not really sure why there was a violation, because they don't see the same violations that you see or that I see. So they didn't have my grandmother, who would always say to you, you gotta keep your property neat, you gotta make sure your grass is mowed, you have pride in ownership. You know, she preached that to all of us, kids, grandkids, everybody. If you own property, you keep it neat. Most of the folks that we're dealing with didn't have somebody telling them, if you own property, you need to keep it neat. And if you say to them, the problem is the stack of tires at the corner of your garage, outside the garage, that's just standing there, that's the problem. They seem surprised because they don't really, like, well, I guess, and I say, well, can they go in the garage? Can you put them inside? Can you put them behind the fence? Can you do something so your neighbors aren't seeing them? Yeah, but they didn't really think that was a violation. They didn't really see that as a problem until you point it out to them. And so some of them, they just need that nudge to, you know, kind of, this is really the problem. So if, when they come into court, if there's a list that you can have available that you bring with you, this is the list. And it can't be a long list. It has to start off with a short list, because they can't do long lists either. We give them a short list, here's the few things you need to fix. Let's have you come back, maybe get those things fixed, and then come back. They will usually do those first few things. They might get distracted, they didn't get everything done. But sometimes it's the simple thing of, you have 4 cars on your property that don't have current tags on them. Can you go get those tags on there? Yeah, I can do that. And when you have them come back, they've got their paperwork, they at least got the vehicles got tags on them now. So we're getting some progress there if we can give them that short list of the things that have to be done. Photographs have been very helpful. They have to be current. You know, we can't have photographs that are 6 months old, because the folks we're bringing into court will always say, I cleaned up the property. I don't know what the problem is. Well, if we don't have current photographs that show us, really, you haven't cleaned up, or here, the tires are still stacked in the corner over here, we need to be able to show them, this is still what we're talking about, you know, red circle around the stack of tires. This is what we're talking about. We have to have photographs that are current. That would be very helpful in giving them that specific list of the things that they need to get done to get the property in compliance. What really would be the best idea is for everyone, if you're filing a zoning ordinance and you've got your village solicitor, you've got your prosecutor there, there needs to be somebody there from your entity representing your group, whether it's the zoning inspector, a trustee, and I think the village of Paulding uses, they send officers out to serve the papers. That officer needs to be there. If they're not there, the defendant says, I cleaned up my property. We don't have anybody to say, no, it hasn't been cleaned up, because we don't have a zoning inspector there to say, I was by there this morning, it still has a lot of work that needs done to it. So we really need to have somebody from the entity there. So whether that's the inspector, whether that's just one of the trustees, an officer, whoever it was that is responsible for going out there and making sure they're trying to get into compliance, that person needs to be in court with the attorney. The attorney can't present the evidence for you, that you can testify, and the attorney can ask you questions and be able to present it that way, but the attorney can't do all that for you. You've got to have one of your folks there in court. So then I also did ask, like when we went through, I had them pull me lists of when I assign fines and costs to somebody, what happens to it, where does it go, how are we doing that? So I did have printed out some things for the last couple of years. So when I assign, you know, someone's got guilty, and I say, here's your fines and your court costs, the fines, whatever the fines might be, those all go directly to the entity, whether that's the township trustees, the village of Oakwood, whoever it is that filed it, the fines go directly to them. Court costs get distributed, the state tells us how to distribute court costs. So that's always for every case. We have to distribute that according to the statute. But the fines that are paid for those zoning violations go directly back to you guys. Sometimes, it just sort of depends on how, they can make payments to the court. So if they owe a total of $300 fines and court costs, can you pay that today? No, I can't. What can you do? I can pay $50 a month. So you might get your money in increments, because they're coming in, they're paying $50 a month till they get it paid in full. So you get sometimes just smaller amounts at a time. Some of these folks will come in I pay the whole thing, they'll pay the whole thing the day they're in court, just to get it paid and get it, and to be able to move on. Some of these cases that have been filed, and it depends on, you know, what the facts are for each of these cases. There are some that are landlords who, you know, have been, because of the property owner, they've been brought in. Here's the landlord, and the landlord then has to go back to their tenant and say, you got to get this cleaned up. And usually, if it's a landlord situation, you can get the landlord to step in and kind of get on them so that they get it straightened out, or they get evicted. So it goes one way or the other. So the landlords, because they're landlords, they'll come in and usually pay their fines and costs right away because they want to kind of keep things moving on. Let's see, what else do I have from here? So when somebody is actually eligible for indigent counsel, because they don't have the money, but there's possible jail time, they have a form they have to fill out. I assign a counsel to them. When it is a traffic case or just a regular criminal case, the county commissioners, just the general way it works, the county commissioners pay that bill. We get reimbursed from the state, usually 75%, kind of varies a little bit. But when it's a village, or when it's a trustees on a township, technically you guys are supposed to pay those attorney fees. And it doesn't seem fair to me that you're trying to enforce your ordinance and you've got an indigent defendant and you have to pay their attorney fees. They average about, you know, $700 to $800 per case. So rather than send the trustees or the villages the bill for that indigent counsel fee, there's some money that the court has available in our budget. I try to use that money so that you guys aren't stuck with that bill. Because I just don't think it's fair that you guys have to do that. But the statute really says if it's a township trustee or a village, you guys either have to have a contract with the commissioners that says the commissioners agree they're going to pay that, or you guys have to pay it. And so I just figure out in the budget how to do it so that you guys don't have to pay it, and it doesn't get reimbursed because there's no contract. So there's some money set aside that I can use to get that reimbursed. But we don't have that happen very often because most of the time they're not jailable offenses. So I typically will have them come in, figure out what they need to do. They all admit guilt. Here's the list, go out there. We have it set for a review hearing in 30 days. Give them time to come back and show that they have got some progress. If they haven't got progress, why didn't you have progress? And try to work with them a little bit until we can get them into compliance. And sometimes it takes months. It's the same thing with folks when they don't have a driver's license. We give them a list, go do these things, because if they're not valid, and they usually have a whole long list of things they have to do to try to get valid, we have them come back. Okay, you're making progress, let's just keep doing it until we can get you valid. It's the same thing with the zoning cases. We just try to work with them, do these things, you know, come back, show us what progress you've made, and hopefully we can start making a difference with some of them that they actually get their properties cleaned up. Honestly, most of them backslide because that's just the way it is. But we at least try to get them into compliance for a while and try to encourage them to make sure they're keeping their property clean, have pride in ownership, and try to get them so that they're keeping them weeds down and don't have stacks of tires everywhere. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. The best thing that you guys could do is have somebody with, you know, Matt. I see Matt kind of slid in the back door. Have somebody with Matt if you're a township trustee, or with your village solicitor when they're there in court. Have your folks there who have current pictures and can say, because the defendants always say, I'm in compliance. So if you have someone there who can show pictures and say, nope, I was just past there this morning, there's no way that they're in compliance. So that's the most helpful thing that you guys can do to try to get things moving along and to show them what they need to still do. So, yeah.
I've got a question. You're talking about the pictures. Did you take them on your phone and bring them and show like the day before, or would that work?
Yeah, the pictures on a phone are always kind of tricky. I always tell defendants or anybody when they bring them in, you know, and then it goes into evidence. So I get to keep the phone if you're entering that into evidence. What we try to do is email the pictures to yourself so you can print them off and bring in the pictures.
Yeah.
That's the best way. I will accept pictures on phones if we need to. It's harder because the screens are usually smaller, and then they're handing it to me on the bench, and I'm trying to look and see, so it's harder. If you can email the pictures to someone to get them printed off, color is best, then that's
So
helpful.
how many days, I mean,
You know,
4 days, 3 days? A
2
little
days
bit
or
more.
less. And it depends on weather and some other things, because we've had people who come in, you know, on a Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock and say, you know, we have pictures from Thursday before, and it's Monday afternoon. Well, those people, I took Friday off work. I worked Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I cleaned everything up, but the pictures that we've got are, you know, a week old. And so I don't know if they really did take the weekend off and clean up their whole property. They're sitting there telling me that they did, and it was good weather, so they could have. So really, if we can get them the closest in time, that's the best. Yeah, which is, I know it's kind of hard because you gotta try to drive past and get the pictures taken and get them printed or emailed. You know, I understand that that's kind of tricky to do, but the closer in time to the court date's the best. Mhm. Any other questions? George?
Judge, you know, I work for both villages, Oakwood and Antwerp. You know, typically, I will reach out to an individual and let them know, hey, this is a violation. You're on the list, I'll be officially coming to see you to clean it up. Sometimes that works. So I give them 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then I give them a notice, which gives them typically 15 days. Then if they don't comply, then I file a complaint or I cite them. So why, when they come to court, do we need to extend that out? When I've already told them everything that needs to be removed, and it's not.
Well, if it's a minor misdemeanor, I don't have to. I can go ahead and, if they're gonna plead guilty, and I sentence them, here's your fine, here's your court costs, and out the door they go. And they don't have to come back. So if they're still not in compliance, I'm fining them for not being in compliance, but they're still not in compliance, and then you're gonna be back knocking on their door in 2 weeks to say, you're still not in compliance, and we're still back to doing the process again. So I try to set it out and tell them, here's the list, here's what needs done, you know, 30 days, have you come back, and let's see if you've got some progress made. Sometimes, and I know you can go in there and tell them all those things, but sometimes, you know, when it's me, they're like, okay, I'll go do it. I mean, George said to do it, I tried to do a little bit, but I didn't get it all done. But, you know, sometimes then they'll listen if we're in there saying there's a little more of a carrot and a stick. My stick is maybe bigger, I don't know. But I think that it gives them that opportunity. I agree with you that they know, you're talking to them, you're sending them notices, they know what they need to do, they're just not doing it. I don't, but, you know, so.
You know, and I was personally involved in one from Antwerp where I think we come back to your court like 3 times, and the solicitor finally called me and said, look, it's gonna cost the village X amount of dollars if I keep going back.
Yeah.
So it wasn't worth it, we just agreed and said good enough and called it a day.
That happens a lot. There's not much we can do if it's just a minor misdemeanor, you know, it's the fine and the court costs, I've already given them the fine, maybe they even paid the fine, but they're still not cleaning up their property. So you have to either cite them again and, you know, try to get to that point where you're elevating it to where it's more of a jailable offense, and then sometimes they're a little more willing to listen, because now there's the possibility of some jail time hanging over their head. So, sometimes there's been a couple people that, you know, 2 days in jail and that was enough that they decided they were gonna clean up their property. But, you know, the problem is the ones that are really the problems, it's more than just that. You know, there's a lot going on with them that they're just not gonna, they're hard to work with because they're not gonna clean up their properties.
You mentioned landlord. In the event that the renter is not going to clean up his property regardless of what to do, does the landlord have any responsibility for that? To get back on him?
They do, and what we'll usually see is that the landlord will then start an eviction process, because the landlord doesn't want to have to put up with it. And so the landlord starts the eviction process to get them out and then go in and do the cleanup if they need to, so. And it depends on a number of different things as well, how long you've been a tenant, you know, just different things. But most of the time, the landlord will then initiate an eviction process. And the landlord doesn't want to have to put up with you.
Anyone else?
So what makes it a jailable offense? Is it just the continuation of the same thing over and over, or is it, I don't really follow you.
So it depends on what statute they're charged under. And it has to be the same statute, and they have to have the same offenses within, it depends on the statute again, within that time period. If they've been convicted And then we're back here 6 months later or a year later, same statute, same offense, then it can rise to the level where now maybe it's a misdemeanor of the 4th degree, so there might be 30 days hanging over their jail, their head, that we would send them to the jail if they're not gonna get their property cleaned up. So.
Okay.
So it just has to be the repeat offense, same statute, same problem, multiple times,
Over
that
and
you can
over.
get to where there's a jailable offense.
Okay.
And we can put them on probation and try to work with them there as well. Probation is an alternative to jail. So sometimes on probation, we can get them to be a little more, proactive in getting their stuff done that they need to get done. So, thanks, Steve.
What about one person, same offense, multiple towns or villages?
Well, it's different, if it's different, under different township regulations, then, because it can't, so it's, if they're moving from township to township, and they're doing a violation in each township, I don't think that's a repeat offense, because it's not the same township, it's not the exact same ordinance, because everybody's
No, no,
ordinances are different.
It's not being moved, it's stationary there already. In each of the villages.
I don't
I'm
know.
talking Jim
owner
Farms,
in different villages.
Villages and townships.
One owner, same owner.
Same owner of the property, multiple townships, multiple villages, and multiple judges.
Okay, it applies to that property. So if there's, that property has the same landlord, that property, multiple offenses. Or same landlord, multiple properties, but moving offenses around. So sometimes they're not doing 2 and 3 offenses on the same property, same landlord.
It's
that-
all one individual, the owner of the property, different townships, different villages, different towns.
That might have to be attacked from a different perspective than the zoning ordinances, because of there might be other statutes that could be looked at to try to get compliance with that, because of the same owner but multiple properties.
And you mentioned just now about, the town ordinances involved with that. Why do we have to have a town ordinances when it's already stated in Ohio Basic Code?
It can be filed under either one.
Okay.
It can be filed under either one. Yeah. So, anything else?
Joe, you got anything you want to add?
Just a quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we're talking a lot about zoning, and they're actually, from the prosecutor's office, we have 3 different methods of attacking junk and garbage and things being brought onto the property. And the one, other than zoning, is the health department. They have a limited amount of jurisdiction, but basically, anytime that there's garbage, rats, animals that are getting into a situation, or there's any type of open septic systems, things of that nature, the health department has some rules and regulations that are very effective. And so that's one of the, I guess, tricks in our bag for Matt and I that we use to clean these up. The second is zoning, and we've tried to make the zoning for the townships as easy as possible. It's collecting data, pictures the judge talked about, getting the property owner, we always want to name the property owner, and then filing the complaint after notice has been given. So we've got that pretty well streamlined, and Matt and I are always available for questions on zoning and how it works and where we need to go with the case if it has a little bit of a sticking point. One of the things that we tried, started last year, is open dumping and open burning. Initially, the Ohio EPA had exclusive jurisdiction to prosecute those cases. Now, we as a county, as the prosecutor's office, have concurrent jurisdiction. So we tried 2 test cases. Both are kind of tough ones that Matt's worked on for a long time, I've worked on for a long time. Matt just actually finished one up in Washington Township where they were bringing wood and tires and junk in. And so that one actually currently, there was a plea on that, and it's currently in process, hopefully getting cleaned up. The second one is in Emerald Township, and that's currently processing. And the neat thing about that is it's a felony level. So the maximum penalty is 2 to 4 years incarceration, whether it's local jail time or prison, and up to a $10,000 fine. So we're trying to reach outside the box, trying to get some more things that have maybe a little bit more gunpowder to help out clean up some of the messes that we see. And so far, we've been fairly effective doing that. But as far as our municipal court, we're there. We try to get as much information to the judge so she can see the full picture. And we appreciate the help of the zoning inspectors as far as gathering that for us. So those are a little bit of something new that we're trying. It's effective, and it's hopefully cleaning up those areas that we've had problems cleaning up. Hey, George.
Joe, I have a question. The gentleman that Mr. Ruger was talking about owns the old Braun building in Oakwood. He recently bought, I believe, the old supermarket in Payne. He owns the junk car lot right across the tracks on the left-hand side as you're going down 127. I don't know where else, but collectively, is there a way this group with you and Tim Copsey could present something as a whole to clean this up?
I'm not familiar as much with the Braun building. I am with the 127 going south.
You can't
Yeah.
have
52 cars in Athens.
Well,
probably
yeah.
150, 200 cars in Oakwood.
You've got a couple of issues. If it's in a village, you've got basically the village ordinances, which I don't deal with as far as the Ohio Revised Code and the township zoning are my tools that I deal with. But from a zoning perspective, when you have multiple locations, each township zoning applies to that particular parcel of land or that problem on the land. So you've got different laws that are applied to each one of those parcels. As far as consolidating them all, I don't see that happening because you have different laws. Could you put them on one complaint? That's a possibility. But as far as like an overall consolidation, you're going to have to cite different sections of the law, different sections of the ordinances in each township in order for it to be effective. The property on 127 going south, I believe that's Jackson?
It is.
Okay, and so Jackson is not a zoned area. Possibly could be coming under the junkyard legislation. I mean, that's a possibility. I don't think anybody's ever approached that, but that's something to take a look at. Does that answer your question, George? Okay.
What about if all of us went together after this one person?
Well, it depends on number one, location, and secondly, it depends on what laws you're going to ask the courts to enforce. So if it's, for example, a township, there's really nothing in Jackson, if we're talking about the junkyard in 127, there's no teeth there, there's no laws that we can apply. If it's an unlicensed junkyard, which is something we could take a look at, then it just becomes the state of Ohio versus that individual, and it would be handled through my office. So there's some technicalities there, but as far as everybody collectively, like 4 or 5 townships going together, or villages going together, I don't see that happening. You have to kind of slice it and dice it so that the judge has the proper revised code section or ordinance that she's going to look at to apply to that situation. Then we have to provide the evidence to support whatever decision we're asking her for.
Even if it's the same person?
Even if it's the same person, correct?
Could we be used as witnesses for each other?
Sure, I mean, anybody that has personal knowledge of a situation or has talked to that individual owner, I mean, they're potential witnesses. Probably more so in these situations, it's not so much testimony, it's documentation, it's photographs. It's knowing that those cars aren't licensed, knowing that the location's not licensed with the state of Ohio to be a junkyard. So there's a lot of background data that we need in addition to testimony.
Now, will there be follow-ups on this if there is judgments made, et cetera? Because in the past, this individual has had trouble with EPA and junk ordinances and this and that, and no one has followed up on anything. And he has been found guilty.
I can tell you the cases that we handle, typically judges look at putting somebody on probation until they get it cleaned up. So that would be the follow-up. The probation officer would meet periodically, whatever the judge and the probation officer decide. Then they would look and see, what's being accomplished, what's not being accomplished. That's the follow-up. And then hopefully the end goal is to get it cleaned up. So that's the mechanism I say that would be in place. And again, whether it's a felony level or whether it's a misdemeanor level, kind of the same mechanics apply.
Good.
Yes.
Perfect. Good.
So in that situation with the property you're talking about, Joe, they have no zoning in
Right.
Jackson Township, so who files a complaint?
It would be filed under the state of Ohio versus that individual. If we're talking about an unlicensed junkyard. Again, if it's a revised code section, the caption or the plaintiff is always the state of Ohio.
But whose responsibility is it to make that complaint, I guess is what.
Well, the complaint has to come from either law enforcement, which my preference would be law enforcement, or like an individual township trustee. And then secondly, it's either Matt or I, whoever draws the short straw. That's the mechanics on that. And then obviously documentation has to come through. But good question.
I guess what I was getting at was, say, I don't like the way that looks, which I don't, I go by it every day. Would it be right for me to come to you and say, hey, I'd like to file a complaint about that place?
We can sit down and
Even
talk,
if
we
I'm-
can sit down and talk about it.
Yeah.
And what we would do is do some preliminary research. I mean, we check first with the state of Ohio, is it a licensed junkyard? And then secondly, I've driven by there 55 miles an hour and I probably don't look real close, but you'd want to make sure that at least on the surface, what we're going to go forward with is there. But I'm familiar with that property. Any other questions? Yeah, Bryce.
What was the third thing? You said the first was health department, the second was zoning, and then I don't know if you got cut off or if I missed it.
The third is it's called open dumping and open burning. And initially, the Ohio EPA had exclusive jurisdiction over that. And now we basically kind of found out that we have concurrent jurisdiction. So Matt and I can file, and that's the one that's a felony. It's got greater consequences. And hopefully it has, it's a help on those real tough situations where you just can't get somebody to move. Anything else? Okay, thank you for your time.
General question, if I can.
Yep.
I guess I'm not really understanding, if I'm driving across the county and I'm speeding, and the deputy pulls me over and gives me a ticket, and I go to court, I'm not gonna be able to say, but I've been driving slower ever since. So if there's a violation that's noted by the zoning inspector, and there's a second violation, and it's documented with photos, when it goes to court, they still have up till the 11th hour to clean it up. When's the deadline for in zoning ordinances? Is it, we'll give you a notice, then you have 30 days, and then bang, now you're in violation, you go to court, you can't make up that time between that 30 days and your court date, and all of a sudden you're absolved. Is that, am I not understanding?
It's a good question. When we draft a complaint, when we draft a complaint, we put a certain date that the violation occurs. So on or about March 14th, 2024. So as of that snapshot in time, we've got photographs, documentation of what happened. So when that gets taken to court, if somebody cleans it up, which is always the preference, then we'd have to take that into consideration. Do you still want to charge them, or do you let them, let them slide, or just pay court costs? I don't know. It depends. But a lot of times that does happen where people get motivated. Not so often though. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah. I was
So
kind of-
even though we're going to court 30 days later, we're looking back at that date on the complaint that says, here's the violation, and also the date that we believe the violation occurred.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just got a random question for you and the judge. When it comes to zoning and classified individuals that's constantly in your courtroom or constantly being prosecuted by you, don't you guys get tired of that same person?
We refer to that as job security.
Because, There's a headache in our county, and it's one individual. And, you know, he's gonna pass the buck, and he's going to find any creep or crawl to get out of stuff, and he has, even though he's been prosecuted. So, you know, I just want to know, you know, if that has any entering into it, whether you just get sick and tired of seeing the same person in your courtroom.
Yeah, I mean, recidivism is always a big factor with some people. As far as doing my job and getting these cases in court, I'll do it, once the judge gets mad at me, I'll do it 50 times.
Okay.
If whatever it takes to clean up, I mean, that's what our responsibility is to enforce the laws in the state of Ohio. So, as long as we can document it, you know, we'll do what we need to do.
Sure.
And I would add that, you know, it's not just Paulding County. I go to judges conference, and every judge talks about it at every place I go. What do you do about this? Because every community has that person or those people who are just problem people when it comes to zoning, and you can't get them motivated to get anything cleaned up. I still think it is still, what our goal is really compliance. Our goal is to get them to get their property cleaned up. So how are we gonna get them to do that? I mean, we do kind of keep waving, you know, a stick at them and say, go do these things and then come back. But, you know, most of them, we can get them at some point at least to try to get the majority of the stuff cleaned up. It's not always everything, but we can try to give them at least a little bit to make it better. But you're gonna have those problem people, you know, those are I deal with the prosecutors and you know, everything else, that you just have those people who are constantly in there for one reason or another anyway. So it's hard to get everybody to do the right thing and to make sure their property is got cleaned up.
Right.
Yes,
I just have a quick question. So say like the village of Oakwood, Antwerp, Payne, Havlet, say they all file something under the same Ohio Revised Code, and just happens to be, you've got this individual 3 times in one day. I mean, would that change anything? You know, you're starting to see the same stuff getting filed over and over again. Would that help at all, or is it just, you know, since it's because it's in Oakwood or because it's in
It's
Payne?
kind of different. I mean, it's the same people, and I see what you're saying, but it is different because they're separate cases with separate zoning, you know, violations, so.
Thank you.
Good questions, anyone?
Thank you.
Chime in again. I hear the jump cards and I hear the repeat offenders. What are the other issues? I used to work in a community that got money from the solid waste district and worked with Cooper Tire and put on a tire recycling bin, that the residents could get rid of their tires and they'd be recycled. And instead of them just dumping them, or instead of them stacking them up. So there are mechanisms and there are avenues for us to work together to help them clean up. Yes, we do the recycling once a week and those kinds of things, but you know, making other things available to them so that they have an easier way to clean up. Do we have anything like that in place, or would that be something that we could work with the solid waste management district or other entities to
Why are you
promote?
stealing my thunder off the agenda?
Oh, my bad. It was a segue, Tom. This is a, okay.
It's not entirely related, but get it.
I was asked a question. What's the difference between trash and junk?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, what's the definition in your ordinance? I mean, the zoning ordinance should have a definition in there of what the township or, you know, the state defines, how they define it. So, sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Yeah, it's definitional. In the revised code and also in the zoning, they have a definition section that says, here's what junk cars are, and it describes those. Or, you know, what the trash, and they call offal and filth. I mean, it's a kind of a broad brush of things that come underneath that. And you just have to make whatever evidence you have of the things that are there, you have to make it fit that definition.
You do that? Okay. Thank you both for taking the time out of your schedule to be here and brief everybody on this. You had no?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We've got 15 minutes here left, and we're going to speed read through some items that I have to bring up. The land bank, again, this year was allocated $500,000 for blight cleanup, commercial and residential. And if you remember last year, we did this program, and we were the top county out of the 5 that put in the amount of work that we did, and we used that full $500,000. And don't get me wrong, there were some things we learned out of that. There were some things we could have done a little bit better. There were some things we should have done differently, and we did learn that. And now we're putting in and allocating the money that was allocated this time. SD just put in last Friday. Paulding County is the first one of the 5 counties, and now because it went so well, she's actually doing Putnam County. So we're the first of 6 counties to be submitted. For our $500,000, she submitted $1.1 million worth of blight and residential cleanup. So that means one of 2 things. A, we're going to have to cut back on some of those that we put in, or B, last year we learned some of the other towns or counties in the state didn't use their full allocation of money. That money went back to the state in a pool of money, and they reallocated it to those that did. So hopefully, at the end of the day, we're going to see a whole bunch more of these cleanups take place. Now, some of the townships will raise their hand and say, hey, we had a couple cleanups that were disasters. They just didn't go well, and we know that. So we've reevaluated who we're going to use as contractors, for one thing. For 2, we're going to change the way that they have to finish the product. And that'll all be talked about and taken care of in pre-meetings at each site before it begins. So I think it's going to be a whole different thing. If you had a bad experience, we apologize, but we've learned from it and we're going to get better. And I think this time's going to be different. Another thing on this is, there's always been the complaint, well, here we are using tax dollars to clean up somebody else's mess, right? The goal was, when we first did this, to make people realize, why are you sitting on this property anyhow? You inherited it from great grandma, you don't live in the area, why don't you just sell the darn thing and see if we can move it and put a new house on it? It's working. We are seeing the property start to change hands. We are starting to see, people keep telling me building costs are through the roof and nobody wants to build. I've got 3 builders right now begging for land bank properties to build on. That's the kind of momentum that we're getting out of this, okay? Kudos to Oakwood for initiating an ordinance that makes you sign up a empty home on a roster and pay a bill to have that done in a year that you're either marketing it, you're either fixing it up, or you're getting it fixed, taken down by yourself. Right now, the calls in Oakwood have been tremendous, okay? Now I've got to figure out some floodplain things there, but we'll get that figured out, and we're going to keep it moving. But we had, there's going to be a momentum shift here. The momentum shift is going to happen because we're using up our allocated monies again. But the chances of us getting a third allocation of $500,000 are not, it's probably not very high. We're probably not going to see this program come through again. So now we've got to adjust as townships and villages to identify what properties are we still going after this cleanup goes through the second round. What properties do we still have that have those empty houses, that have those falling in roofs, that have the problems that we need to get rid of? Now we've got to approach it in a different way. We're going to have to figure out how to collectively work together with our CICs, with our villages, with our townships, with the land bank. Are there pools of money that we can get possession of these properties? Now, that's a lot easier in the village because we got sewer and water. It's a lot more difficult right now in the townships because you got to come up with this mega dollars for septic. All right? We're working on that. It's a long, drawn-out discussion, but we're trying to figure that out, how we can do it. Jamie and I was just talking about a property in Blue Creek Township right now. It's for sale. It's just short of an acre. It's $22,000. Who wouldn't love to have that? But you got to take down a house and a couple buildings and then pay another $20,000 for a septic tank. Now I've got $45,000 invested before we can even start building. That's not attractive. So we'll figure out these pieces as we go. So what I'm asking all of you to do is identify in your communities, what empty lots do you have that we can build on? Where can we send these guys that are willing to put in their money to build a spec home? We're not looking for renters. We're not looking for more landlords in the county. We're looking for people that are building homes to sell to young couples, young kids that are coming home. They're working, getting good jobs. One of the people that looked at our home on Jackson Street, spec home that's being built right now, young lady that teaches in Paulding High School, got a great job, great pay, and she's driving from Fort Wayne every day. That's what we got to fix. How do we get these homes in these spots? So identify these places and let me know where they're at. I'll tell you, I sat down with the Paulding CIC and introduced this idea on their last meeting, which would have been 2 months ago now. We had a meeting, and I said to the CIC, this plan and this idea. Tell me where your not your blighted, tell me where your empty lots are. And they said, this is the Paulding CIC in the village of Paulding, said, oh, Tim, we don't have any lots like that. So, you know that me, okay, that's a challenge. I'm going home and see what I can figure out. That evening, I identified 13 open lots that we gave the property to Jason Vance, and he's identified for me which ones have sewer, which ones have water, which ones don't. Some of these properties have never, ever been built on since the town was established, or since municipal water was established, so they don't have sewer and water. So now we're working with the village, going to work with the village on how do we get those that sewer and water there. That's what we'll do in each village if we have the opportunity. We just need to know what properties there are. Everybody has 2 or 3 properties next to them so that nobody builds next to them. But again, those houses have started to flip generations, and people are starting to say, I'm going to sell the house, and if I can make a few bucks on these properties in separate sales, I'll do it. So please keep identifying those and let me know. Another piece is, I've got a contract, the contractor that's building the house on 614 Jackson right now has said, hey, I put in every penny of this, I'll do it on my own, I'll do another one, but I need some help. How do I get some help? So I've sat down with the Paulding County Area Foundation and I said, what kind of seed money can we use to identify help for a contractor like this? The house is going to cost him $125,000 to build. Do we have $100,000 that we can put in a pot and say, here's $100,000, you put in every other penny after, you sell it for $180 or whatever the number is, you keep every penny of it, but you sign back the $100,000 that we loan you. I've been sharing this idea with different bankers to see how this would work. Who has to own the property? What all legalities do we have to go through? The bankers said, Tim, don't be silly. Don't give them $100,000. Give them $25,000. We'll give them $75,000 and cover the rest because that's the down payment. They get to do that. You get your money back. We make a little bit of money on interest. They get to sell the house. So now instead of doing $100,000 on one home, now I can fund 4 homes at $25,000 each. So I said, ooh, that's a good, cool deal. What if I take that banker's idea to a couple other banks and see if they're interested? And guess what? They are. So now, instead of 1 or 2 homes, now maybe we're going to get 4, 5, or 6. So there's a lot of stacking up that we're trying to do to get these things done. We are having a meeting Monday night at Paulding. Paulding is one of the many villages that have CRAs, Community Reinvestment Agreements. Through those CRAs, there is a clause that for residential building, you can offset taxes for X amount of years, X amount percent for X amount of years. So what kind of percentage would we be interested in offering an offset of taxes to get this young lady from Paulding to buy this new home and not have to pay taxes and a house payment right out of the gate until she gets it established a little bit? Every one of our villages has a CRA. Once we get the numbers figured out with Paulding, we're going to go back and we're going to talk to Oakwood, we're going to talk to Antwerp, and we're going to talk to Haviland. You guys already use it, I think. And so we're going to try and make this work wherever we can, but the more incentives we can stack up for builders and buyers, the better off we're all going to be. We're not going to get a big residential establishment of 60 or 70 homes that we need. The housing study in 2019 said we're short 215 to 310 homes in our county. and we haven't built very many since, we are going to have to find onesie-twosies to get this job done if we want to promote to our kids on April 3rd at Career Day in here to come back home after you go to college or go to work. All right, any questions on that? Now, next thing is talking about tonight zoning, all right? As we're all talking about trying to figure out zoning, the first thing we got to do is identify what date your last zoning update was. Carol, what date was yours?
Well, that zoning update was January 4th.
January 4th of this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's awesome. Gene, when was your last zoning update? 1989. I have the book. Yep. So 1989. So there's all different ranges, and look, no, Gene and his team is not going to sit down and go through that whole book at a meeting and figure out what's changed since 1989. We all have to take little bits and pieces, and maybe that becomes part of your zoning committee meetings, or maybe it becomes part of your trustee and or council meetings, where each time you meet, you take 2 or 3 paragraphs and go through there and see what has changed since the last time you updated your zoning. And let's face it, times have changed, right? We allow some things today that we didn't allow before. We have solar today that we didn't have before. Issue 2 today is going to come in that we didn't have before. So there's always things changing. So it's not bad that you're changing your zoning. You're just trying to adjust to what it is. And that makes it a heck of a lot easier. I'm assuming, Matt and Joe, that if your zoning's up to date, it's a lot easier for you guys when you're trying to figure out what's being broken or violated.
Yeah, and surprise, there's at least half of the townships that have zoning have updated within the last 5 years.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing process, like you said.
Yeah, you got to keep it going on. So, with that, back to Mr. Straley's point of how do we do other things, okay? As we're shifting in the land bank and we're shifting on what's being violated and bad, the number one thing that we're talking about is cars, right? So, we just helped Mr. Ken Cohart, get a JOE grant, a Jobs Ohio Inclusive grant, where he was able to purchase a piece of new equipment that doesn't any longer smash cars, it shreds them. So they empty the fluids out of it, they get the tires off, they drop it in this thing, and it comes out a bunch of scrap that you can pick up in your hand. The cool thing about it is, not only that is that cool, the cool thing is he can dump cars in there as fast as he can get them. So now, we have an outlet for what you're talking about of how do we get the cars to him. We all know of cars in our villages and our townships that need to be shredded. For whatever reason, they've sat on grandma's property for 15, 20 years. What we need to do to start that discussion is identify what kind of numbers are we talking. In your township, Jeannie, are we talking about 2 cars or are we talking about 100? In your township, Jason, are we talking about 2 or are we talking about 100? And don't get me wrong, we're not just going to go out and count cars. We got to find out from these people, why has that car sat there so long? Why has that RV not moved? Is it the motor's out of it? Is it that the neighbor brought it over and parked it there and went home and never came back? What are they willing to give up these cars? And what Ken has told me is, there is money that we could pay out for this to happen. He could give them, pull up in there with a truck, ask to take the car, give them money for the car, and take it and have it shredded. He's got a buyer for every piece of shred he can get. So he makes some money, he's willing to give some of that money back to the owner. Another catch in there is, okay, the neighbor did park that car there several years ago and the motor's out of it, but it doesn't have a title, okay? So there's a process that we're gonna have to go through to that. We'll set up that process if you come back and tell me, Tim, we have enough of these vehicles to make this worthwhile for Ken to go buy the truck and for the prosecuting attorney or whatever court system has to go through this process to make sure that we have a title. And there's going to be some expense there too, so we got to figure out all those pieces, how this could work. But that's the first step. You made a great point about tires. I don't know about that yet, but that doesn't say we can't look at it and see if there's a tire collection day or whatever.
Well, by law, the solid waste management districts are supposed to give money back to the counties. And so we had household hazardous waste collection day, scrap tire collection day. It was funded by the solid waste management district, which we're all paying for.
Yep.
And that money should come back to us. And if you do that, then you get them all recycled. We limited it to 4 tires per person per trip.
Yeah.
But for the first one, you could say, hey, 10 for the first time, and then start limiting it.
Okay.
Just to help get rid of those.
I know the Ohio EPA has something with some tire mitigation program.
Okay.
As well, that we looked into when we had a bunch back in the Brown Township building. So I know there's a program there as well.
Awesome. We'll do some digging then. All right. Last thing that I have, water, power, and, what was the time? Water, power, and sewer gas lines. So where was I just at that said, what, you guys doing that?
What's that?
Marking your water lines?
Yes, GIS.
So GIS, if your village and or township is marking any GIS systems, we need to get those over to Mr. Harder so that they end up on the county GIS system in a different layer. Because it makes it a lot easier for my job when somebody says, hey, Tim, I'm looking at this property right at the edge of this village, and I need to know how far away sewer and water is and how we get it there. It's a lot better than me calling and trying to catch somebody that's at work or doing something and we gotta wait till a meeting to find an administrator or whatever it is. If I can go on that and look real quick and see where those are, that's a blessing. And the faster we get these answers to people, the better chance we have of landing something at that site that they're trying to do. Sarah, you got anything?
Actually, I do have just a couple things. I did get.
Oh, time's up, sorry.
I did get, Antwerp, Paulding Village, Oakwood Village, and Crane Township zoning on the website now, so those are available
awesome.
to you. If, anybody else has zoning maps that they wanna get to me, I can digitize those and get those available as well. That's the main thing that I have right now.
Cool. Brian did a great job for us for that Oakwood zoning that we had a hand-drawn colored map and he made it official. Anybody else? Anything you want to throw out there? I don't mean to hold us up. I'm sorry we got this late, but it's a good discussion. Mr. Landers?
I'm good.
You good? Okay. Anybody opposed to this meeting again, or everybody good if we have another meeting in the next quarter?
Tim,
Yes?
I walked in late because you told me the meeting was 6:30.
Oh, sorry, Ron.
I'm usually half an hour early.
I'll get better next time. Anybody else? If not, does anybody want to meet again? Is this okay to keep meeting once a quarter? And again, we have the mayor's meetings. I've got them both listed here. The mayor's meeting, next mayor's meeting is Wednesday, May 15th, back at my office at 6 o'clock. And that is a change because we said the day after, but my grandson's graduating preschool and I'm not going to miss it. And then the township, so our next zoning inspector meeting will be the 19th of June. We will be back at my office unless, again, we get the RSVPs that say we need a bigger space. And last thing, don't forget the Paulding County Township Association Fish Fry, July 25th. Thanks for coming.